This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll take you to their store and they'll know I sent you there. Hi everyone, I'm Hone, and it's Wednesday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10. Most of the time, this series looks at the best cards in the history of Magic by examining how much success they've had at the game's highest level of competition. Sometimes, though, I like to look at things on the other end of the spectrum, the absolute worst cards in the history of the game, and that's what we'll be doing in this video, looking at the worst Selesnya cards that have ever been printed. I have already done a video on the best Selesnya cards ever. It is a bit dated at this point, but if you're interested in seeing the flip side, you can find the link in the description below. Anyway, a list on the worst of anything is generally going to be subjective, but I do use a little bit of data to help inform my picks. If a card has ever managed a Premier Event Top 8, or if it's played more than just a little bit in EDH, it's hard to think of it as one of the worst cards ever. In other words, those things aren't true about any of the cards on this list. Additionally, these cards are pretty bad and limited too. So, for a card to be eligible to appear on this list, it had to have a Selesnya color identity. This means the card needs to have the green and white mana symbol appear somewhere on the card without any other mana symbols appearing. This means a card can simply have green and white in the casting cost, or it can appear in the text box, or some combination between the two. In all, 289 cards were eligible for this list, and in this video, I'm going to give my picks for the absolute worst of them. At number 10, I have Nature's Blessing. This card might be bad, but I do like the idea behind its design. An enchantment that lets you pay mana and discard cards to permanently give one of your creatures a keyword ability or a +1/+1 counter is kind of cool. It kind of feels like a card that should have been in Ikoria Lair of Behemoths, a set that utilized keyword counters, but it's a much older card than that. So, what this card does is cool, but everything you have to do to get it online makes it way too inefficient. It costs 4 mana to even get on the battlefield, and then having to discard a card and pay 1 green and 1 white mana every time you want to use it is pretty rough. It will just typically be better to play cards in your hand than it will be to activate this, and sure, if you're flooding out, it's a reasonable mana sink, but you can do a lot better than Nature's Blessing if you need a mana sink. At number 9, I have included 2 cards, but that's because they are functionally identical. Horned Cheetah and Zebra Unicorn. The only difference between the two is their creature type. Both of these 4 mana 2/2s come with pseudo lifelink. Lifelink is nice and all, but these cards are simply asking for way too much mana for it. The thing that saves both of these from appearing higher on the list is the fact that they are at least good to put auras or equipment on, as all lifelink and pseudo-lifelink creatures are. But at the same time, there are literally hundreds of better creatures to put equipment and auras on, so why would anyone want to put these in their EDH deck? Some people do, and that's beyond me. Also, it's kind of funny that both of these creatures are literally just normal creatures from the real world with horns added to them. Horns equals lifelink, I guess. Who knew? At number 8, it is Lady Kaliria. She's from Legends, the first set to have multicolored cards and the first set to have legendary creatures, and Lady Kaliria is both of those things. Oftentimes, when something new shows up in Magic, they either make it completely busted or way too weak, and for the most part, the Legends in Legends are in that latter category. The big problem tends to be the absurd casting cost. 7 mana for a 3/6 with this ability is pretty rough, and don't get me wrong, her ability is actually kind of nice. It basically makes it so that your opponent won't be able to attack or block with small creatures, and even their big creatures will be in significant danger. But by the time you play this on turn 7, it usually will just be way too outclassed to matter. And while she's good when she actually sees the battlefield, she isn't so good that it's worthwhile to cheat her into play either, and that's why no one plays her. At number 7, it is Gabriel Angelfire, another bad Selesnya card that has a pretty cool design, and another legend from Legends. Gabriel Angelfire costs a whopping 7 mana for a 4/4. It is kind of cool that he gains a keyword ability of your choice during each upkeep, which does usually mean he will be a reasonable attacker, since you can always choose what is the best for you to get through with him, but the amount of mana you pay here is just too high to be good. Like Lady Kaliria, he's kind of nice when he hits the battlefield, but he isn't worth cheating into play either, not when way better creatures are available for those strategies. At number 6, I have God Toucher. This 4 mana 2/2 would have to do something pretty remarkable to make that stat line worth it, and it doesn't get there at all. It has an ability that lets you prevent damage done to a big creature, but you have to pay 1 generic and a white for it every time, and tap the creature. And yes, the Naya Shard in Shards of Alara is all about power 5 or greater, but even so, this payoff wasn't particularly good in Limited either, since it comes on such a mediocre card. That means it has an absolutely horrendous fail case. And even the upside isn't incredible. You have to have just the right board state for the ability to be worthwhile, and that's why nobody plays this thing, even in EDH decks with 5 power creatures. At number 5, it's Daughter of Autumn. This is another 4-mana green creature with a white ability that prevents damage, but I think Daughter of Autumn is even worse than God Toucher. It does have better base stats than God Toucher, and that's nice, but its ability is generally more restrictive. God Toucher can prevent all damage to one of your big creatures, while Daughter of Autumn can just redirect 1 damage at a time, and only if that damage is targeting a white creature. Now, there are definitely board states where this will be useful, but the huge limitation on how much damage she prevents generally means she will become irrelevant quickly, and that just isn't something you need in your deck. At number 4, I have Vitalizing Cascade. Cards that just gain you life tend to not be very good. This is because you go down a whole card and use mana for something that doesn't have a meaningful impact on the board. I know life gain decks are a thing and all, but the life gain cards that you actually want to run in those decks tend to do other things in addition to gaining your life. I know someone in the comments will say, but if you have infinite mana, you can gain infinite life with Vitalizing Cascade, and you would be right, but there are way better things to do with infinite mana out there. Generally, cards that aren't complete and utter failures if you don't get your infinite mana combo online are the way to go. There are some other Selesnya cards that just gain life, but most of them at least let you choose any player to gain life, and since group hug decks are a thing, most of them are played considerably more than Vitalizing Cascade. It also has really bad flavor text too. It quotes Esmira as saying, "Water is like breathing, necessary for life," as if that's some really deep insight. Esmira should probably know that everyone knows water is necessary for life. At number 3, I have Folk Medicine, another card that just gains you life, but I think it's even worse than Vitalizing Cascade. This is because it doesn't have the infinite mana upside. 3 mana to gain 1 life for each of your creatures is a terrible deal, even with Flashback. People will look at something like this and think, well, if my board's really big, think of all the life this can gain me. But in reality, if your board is big enough that this is gaining you a ton of life, you probably won the game anyway. Thus, running something like this, that is atrocious 99% of the time, isn't going to be worth it. At number 2, it is Votary of the Conclave. This is a really bad Selesnya version of Drudge Skeletons. I know regeneration is primarily in black and secondary in green, so Drudge Skeletons is more efficient, but the difference between the two cards is absolutely massive. And keep in mind, Drudge Skeletons isn't exactly a good card anyway, but it's one that wouldn't end up on a worst cards list. Votary does cost 1 less mana, but regeneration costing 3 times the mana and requiring a different color of mana is no small thing. Leaving up 1 black mana for a cheap regeneration is just going to happen on some turns with Drudge Skeleton. Leaving up 2 generic and a green for your Votary of the Conclave to regenerate is way more difficult, and you will often have to not leave mana up to regenerate it. And I mean, it's just a 1/1 anyway, so at best it will usually just be something that can block forever, but the massive amount of mana you have to pump into it will quickly become ridiculous. This basically amounts to a 1 mana 1/1 with some really minor upside, and that just isn't worth a card. And at number 1, I have included 2 cards, Sir Chandlar of Eberron and Torsten von Ursus. Both of these are vanilla multicolored legends from Legends that are absolutely atrocious on the vanilla test. These 2 cards make Lady Kaliria and Gabriel Angelfire look like Gristlebrand. Chandlar is a 6 mana 4/7 and Torsten von Ursus is a 6 mana 5/5. It's pretty crazy that they decided to make these creatures so inefficient, since they come with 2 downsides that were brand new at the time. First, they cost more than 1 color of mana, and second, the legend rule applies to them. And when Legends was originally released, the legend rule was highly restrictive. You could only play 1 copy of any legend in your deck. I guess they were really worried that Torsten von Ursus was going to get out of hand. Side note, there is actually 1 vanilla legend from Legends that I chose to omit from this list, Jasmine Boreal, who, while not very efficient, is way more efficient than either of these are. Well, those are my picks for the worst Selesnya cards in all of Magic. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future MTG Top 10s, don't forget to subscribe. And if you need to catch up on the 310 plus MTG Top 10s I've already done, you should see the playlist on your screen now. Thanks for watching.